Hello everyone and welcome to the shooting tutorial done by Raycast. I am the CEO of Raycast, and in this video we are going to take a look at two different methods for creating shooting mechanics. They are the most used, and we won't go into all of the detail with recoil and muzzle flashes and stuff like that, but I will show you how to script shooting and how to implement it into a game. Also, you can choose on your own which of the methods you want to use. It really depends on the style of your game. We are going to be implementing this raycast shooting mechanic into our survival game, which we have a tutorial series on also on our YouTube channel, so you can go ahead and check those out if you want to. But first of all, I have set up a scene here inside of Unity to demonstrate the differences between the two kinds of shooting. The first one we are going to be taking a look at is what's called prefab shooting, or at least I call it that. And this kind of shooting effect is pretty much achieved by instantiating a bullet, which you have then attached a script to, and a rigid body so you can make it shoot out. So you apply some force, and then Unity's collision system will do the rest. And once it hits something, it will check if it will then send a message to whatever game object it hit that the game object here should have applied damage to it. And you can change the damage on the bullet itself using this variable. But let's just, first of all, before we get into the scripting, let me show you how this actually behaves in game. So let's hit play. And you can see that I've made this little red bullet. And once it hits the enemy dies. And this is because I've set the enemy to have 100 HP, health points. And I've set the damage also to be 100. So if I go back into Unity, into the project pane and select the bullet prefab that I've made, we can go under the damage variable and simply change this to something less, let's say 50. And therefore, when I play the game, I need to hit the enemies 2 times before they disappear. But as you can see, there can be some errors with this. There can be glitches, especially if I change this back to 100, especially if we make it so that the bullet goes even faster. Because realistically, a bullet travels so incredibly fast, especially with modern weapons, of course, that you would have to turn this up so you wouldn't even be able to see the bullet. So if I open up the prefab shooting script, this is how it looks. It simply has a variable called the bullet, and this is declared as a type rigid body because we want to later influence the force and the positioning of the rigid body. We simply want it to shoot out. And it also has a speed variable which can then be changed inside of Unity. It then checks if the player hits the mouse button, and if he does, we want to instantiate the bullet. So instantiate the bullet, and the instantiated version of the bullet should be called clone. We then want to apply a velocity to the clone, so clone.velocity in the direction forward by the speed amount, the speed variable. And then I've just added that the clone game object should be destroyed after 3 seconds, so that our hierarchy won't be filled up completely. So when I play the game and make some bullets, you can see them start to disappear after 3 seconds. Right, so that's the prefab shooting. Let me just show you how this can be used wrong. So I have, for now, attached this to our main camera, the prefab shooting script. And if I change up the speed to, let's say, 200, which would probably be more realistic first of all, the bullet goes really fast. It can go through walls also, because simply it's too fast for the Unity collision system to handle. And, well, I have to shoot the enemies a whole lot of times before they die, even though they should die on just one shot. So it can be really effective for creating slower bullets, or if you want to be able to throw hand grenades. But in general, if you want to be precise with your shooting, prefab shooting is just not the way. So let's go ahead and disable this and select our player instead and enable the raycast shooting, which I've of course attached to the player. And let's just see how this works. So hit play. And so we can see that I have made a little particle that appears wherever we hit something. And of course I am missing the crosshairs that would be in the center of our scene in this preview scene. But so it can be a little difficult to aim. But once you get that in place, this should work just fine. So I can aim at the enemy and they will die. And I can pretty much guarantee that this will happen every time. One thing though, of course the enemies does have to have colliders attached to them. But that's also the case with the prefab shooting. Let's take a look at how raycast shooting actually works. So here we have quite a few things going on, and most of these are actually because I wanted to show you what the computer does behind the game. So this is what the computer does. So if I just quickly hit play while I am in the scene view also, so I hit play here. There you go. You can see that the computer draws a red line between the player or the camera, what he's pointing at, and the enemy or whatever he's shooting at. And so the computer is able to more realistically calculate how the bullet would fly. You then have to implement stuff like gravity and other forces that could manipulate the trajectory of the bullet, but this is a much better way to do it. So that's pretty much raycast shooting. So if I just quickly open up Paint, we have in the first example, in the prefab shooting example, this is the prefab shooting. We simply take a point, this can be whatever, this would normally be an empty game object, this box is an empty game object. And we say that from here, we want to create a bullet prefab. So we instantiate a bullet around that. And then later we tell it that we want to fly in a certain direction. And this would normally just be forward. And this can be done using a speed variable, which you can then change inside of Unity. So that's it for the prefab shooting. And because this bullet prefab has a rigid body attached to it, it will by default collide with things in the scene. Raycast shooting works somewhat similar, but a little different. So this is the raycast shooting. And what we're doing here is we have our player. And whenever he presses the button, we tell the computer to draw an invisible line. Let's make this green. From the camera or the way he's looking until it hits something. Whenever it hits something, we want to instantiate some particles wherever it hits. So here we can instantiate some sparks or some blood. And then we simply say that we want to send a message to whatever it hits. And this means that we can call a function on the game from this script that is attached to the game object that we hit. So if this was our enemy, this is our enemy, which would then be red, we can call a function on the enemy script saying that it needs to lose health. So that's basically it for understanding the different methods. The one that we are going to be using in our survival game is the raycast shooting. So let me just go ahead and open up the actual scene from our survival game. And this is how the game looks so far. We have an enemy down here. Let me see if I can find him. There he is. That's our enemy. And because we are just testing some stuff out, I want to bring him over to our player. To our little village. So if I go ahead and hit play, we can see him. And he actually also chases us. And for now, we can only hit him, but we want to also create a shooting mechanic. So I haven't actually modeled out a gun. But this is not important for this tutorial. The gun would simply be graphics. For now, we just want to create the script that handles the shooting. And so, if we go under the player, the main camera, we can see that I have made an empty game object called melee. And under this melee, I have a mace and a sword. And so I can parent all of the different weapons that I want to exist in my scene to this melee object. So if I go ahead and disable the mace, I want to create a new object called gun. And for now, this is just going to be an empty game object. This is where you would bring in your model, the gun. And I'm just going to call this gun. Drag it under the melee game object. And let's center off the position. And there we go. It's pretty much in the center of our camera trajectory. And a little out from our player. That looks good. Not that it really matters as long as you don't have a model. So let's actually add a script now. So hit the add component button. New script. And call this, let's call this raycast shooting. Raycast shooting. And I'll just quickly capitalize the R. Actually, let's not do that because Unity wouldn't like us to. So let's open up the script in MonoDevelop. And here we go. This is how it looks. So let's start writing some shooting functionality. We can go ahead and delete the function start because we won't be using that. And let's make some variables. The first variable we're going to make is called var. And then we are going to write, you can write whatever you want, but this is basically just going to store the particles that are going to emit whenever our so-called bullet hits something. So this could be sparks, this could be blood, and you could also have different particles emit depending on what you actually hit. So I'm just going to write var particles. Actually, I'm going to write effect. And then it's going to be a type transform. The next one is going to be a var. And this is going to be the damage variable. So let's write the damage. And by default, let's set this to 100. Let's go into our function update now. And write some more code. So here we're going to type var hit. And it's going to be a type raycast. See if I can spell this right. Raycast hit. Yes. And then a var ray of type ray. And it's going to be ray. And it's going to be equal to camera.main.screen point to ray a vector parentheses vector 3 parentheses screen dot width times 0.5 comma screen dot height small letters screen dot height times 0.5 and then comma 0 end up parentheses and then a semicolon. Now what we're doing here is we are creating two variables inside our function update. So these are constantly going to be changed. The first one is called hit, and it's going to basically store all of the information of the game object that we are going to be hitting. So our hit function, or hit variable, I'm sorry, is going to store information about our enemy. So whenever we send out the line and it hits the enemy, it's going to store information about what we hit and where we hit it. So that is something we are going to reference later to find our stuff and to send a message to the game object that it should lose damage. So this is our hit variable. Now let's go back and see what our ray variable does. Our ray is our actual raycast. So this is our line. And here we simply say that the center of the screen should be sending out the line straight forward. So ray equals camera.main screen point to ray. And the screen point to ray function will simply take whatever position on the screen, that means a 2D coordinate, and send out a line straight forward from that. And here we declare where exactly that's going to be. And it's going to be half down our screen. So we take the width, and it's going to be the width times 0.5. So that means about here. And it's going to be the height times 0.5. So that means half of the height, which gives us the center of the screen. And on the Z, we just wanted to start directly from the camera. And so this is how we actually cast out one of these lines. Alright, so now we want to check if the player actually presses the input mouse button, so actually presses the fire button. So if input.get mouse button down, you can use anything here, but I'm going to use the mouse button down, 0, which means the left mouse button. Then we want something to happen, so let's open up some parentheses so we can make some logic for this if statement. And inside of here, we want yet another if statement. We want if physics dot raycast. So if the raycast actually hits something, ray hit 100, and separate them with commas and make sure you close up the parentheses. So this will check, this will make sure that it casts out this ray, that it stores the information in the hit variable, and that it only does this if it's inside a range of 100, so that you won't be shooting stuff all the way across the scene. But feel free to play around with this variable. It really depends on what you want to achieve. So let's open up some more brackets so we can have some logic inside of this new if statement. And here we are going to do quite a few things. Let's start out by just actually writing the dying of our enemy. So we are going to write hit.transform.send message. and open parentheses and call this apply damage, comma, the damage, comma, send message options dot don't require receiver. Close up the parentheses and end with a semicolon. Now, I know that this code can be a lot and it is quite confusing, but let me just go over what we have going on. So far, we have the damage variable, which is going to simply tell the computer how much we want to damage our opponent. We have some variables helping us in sending out the ray and looking at what it hits. And we have some if statements making sure that this only happens when it actually hits something and when the player presses the fire button. And if all of these requirements are met, then we want to send a message to whatever we hit that it should apply damage. And I can see that I have misspelled this to apple damage. So apply damage. It's very important that this name here is the same as the name of the function that should apply the damage. So what's going on here is we tell the hit.transform.sendMessage that we want it to call a function called apply damage, and it has a requirement, and that is that it will use the damage variable. So we call the apply damage function and send the damage variable with it. And if whatever we hit doesn't have this damage function, then we just won't care. So it doesn't have to have a receiver, then nothing will happen, simply. So let's open up the script that will actually be applied damage to. So go back into Unity. Let's just quickly see if we have any errors. I can see that we have 2. If physics.raycast function update. Let me see. I can't seem to find any errors. Oh yeah, I've missed a parentheses in the if statement. So quickly close that up. See if we still have any errors. No, we are error free. What a lovely thing. Now we can go and check out our enemy script. There's our enemy. And this was written in the survival game series tutorial series, and you can just go ahead and check it out. But it's a very simple script called enemy health. And inside of here you can see that we have a function called apply damage, which requires the damage variable, and it's simply gonna say that health will be less the amount of damage. So health minus equals the damage. So we will subtract the damage variable that we're going to be sending from the health. Alright, so I'll just quickly close off some of these scripts. So these are the 2 most important scripts. And let's go ahead and test out if this actually works. So open up the game. Hit play. And indeed, when I click the button and point on the enemy, it does disappear from our scene. So that's it for the most basic part of raycast shooting. If you also want to apply some particles, we can do that. So let's go back into the raycast shooting script. This can be really helpful in showing the player where he hits when he misses, and so on and so forth. So let's write var particle clone equals instantiate, and the instantiate function is what you use whenever you want to spawn an object, so make an object appear all of a sudden. So open up a parentheses and type effect, the variable effect we declared earlier, comma, hit dot point, comma, quaternion dot look rotation, open up parentheses, hit dot normal, close parentheses, and a semicolon. Now, this line makes a new variable called particle clone, and this allows us to later delete this when it's done playing. But the important part is not this. The important part is the instantiate effect at the hit dot point with the rotation of quaternion.look rotation hit dot normal. Now, if you're not too heavy on math, basically what the normal is, so I'm gonna open up a new paint document. Basically what the normal is, at least in this case, is if we have a circle, the normal would be this line. So what we're doing is we want, if we hit the circle from a certain angle, let's say we hit it from here, we want to make sure that the particles are facing this way out, and not emitting inside of the circle or the enemy. So we want it to emit outwards, and this is done by simply taking the normal of that point, and so we can make sure that the particles will emit the correct way. And so if we go back into the script editor, we simply instantiate the particles at the position where we hit with this normal rotation. But you'd really, I can understand if it's difficult wrapping your head around. But for now, you can just go ahead and write it in. It should work in all cases. And then type after that, destroy particle clone and dot game object, comma, after 2 or 3 seconds you can choose. So I'm just gonna write 2. So this will just make sure that we don't have a lot of particles in our scene. They will be destroyed after 2 seconds. And let's quickly make a particle for us to instantiate. I've done this beforehand, so I'm just gonna use the one I used inside of the example scene. So I have it under the shooting tutorial and then bullet hit. So I'm gonna drag that out into my assets folder. So there it is. Select the gun and drag in the bullet hit. But you can always do this by making a game object, create other particle system, triggering around with it until you're satisfied, and then just dragging it into the project to make a prefab out of this. So now that we have added this effect, let's hit play. And indeed, when I hit the wall, you can see the different particles start emitting. And when I hit the enemy, he dies and the particles also emit. So that's it for shooting. I know this was quite a long video, but it is a difficult subject, especially when you want to add different forces, particle effects, and so on and so forth. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one.